The tray burned my palms. Steam pushed up through the foil, sharp and heavy. The smell of garlic and rosemary clinging to my clothes as I stood there, frozen. The table was already full. Plates clinked. Forks scraped. Someone laughed, too loud, too careless. And then her voice landed, clean and final. "You'll eat after everyone else." No anger. No hesitation. Just a statement. Efficient. Dismissive. Something inside me gave way. Not with noise, not with drama, but with a quiet, irreversible crack. Like wood splitting in winter after holding too much weight for too long. I looked down at the roast. 8 hours of tending. Turning. Waiting. I remembered waking early to marinate it. My fingers stiff, my back aching, telling myself it mattered. I told myself I mattered. The table didn't look up. No one noticed my pause. No one noticed me at all. So I lifted the tray. It was heavier than it should have been. Heat seeping through the thin foil, biting into my skin. I waited just a second for someone to stop me, to ask a question, to say my name. Nothing. I walked past the table, past the coats draped over chairs, past the noise. The front door opened with a soft creak, and cold air rushed in, sharp enough to steal my breath. Still no one followed. No gasp. No confusion. Just the dull continuation of a dinner that didn't need me. Outside, the night was unforgiving. Cold. Clean. Honest. The kind of cold that doesn't pretend to be kind. I welcomed it. I adjusted my grip and started walking. Each step pulled at my arms, the weight growing heavier with every block. The streetlights flickered on above me, shadows stretching long across the sidewalk. My fingers burned, then went numb. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. 3 blocks. That's all it was. By the time I reached my front door, my hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from something I couldn't name yet. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. It smelled like lemon soap and dust, like a place that had been waiting. I set the tray down on the counter and stood there, breathing, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock I hadn't wound in weeks. No voices. No instructions. No permission required. I cut into the roast while it was still hot. The knife slid through effortlessly, perfectly cooked. I sat at my table, and ate slowly, deliberately. I tasted every bite. No one commented. No one interrupted. No one told me to hurry up or wait my turn. For the first time in longer than I could remember, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. When I finished, I washed the plate, dried it, and put it away. Then I sat by the window and watched the trees bend in the wind, their branches unafraid of making noise. That's when the phone rang. Once. Then again. I didn't move, because whatever I had just done, it wasn't about dinner. And whoever was calling wasn't ready for what this moment meant. Why did one sentence push me out the door? And why did the silence that followed feel like freedom? The phone rang until it stopped. No voicemail. No message. Just the sudden absence of sound, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stayed where I was, sitting by the window, my hands folded in my lap as if I were waiting for permission that never came. Outside, the trees moved restlessly, their branches scraping against one another, unconcerned with whatever small earthquake had just passed through my life. I envied them. They bent. They made noise. They didn't apologize for existing. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying that single sentence. You'll eat after everyone else. It echoed without volume, without tone, stripping itself of excuses every time it returned. There was nothing hidden in it. No misunderstanding to unravel. Just truth finally said out loud. Sometime before dawn, I got up and made tea. The kettle screamed softly, familiar and grounding. I carried my cup to the table and sat there, watching steam curl upward like a question mark. I realized something then that made my chest tighten. No one had asked where I was. Not once. Morning came quietly. Pale light slid across the kitchen floor, landing on the counter where the roast still sat, half-wrapped, waiting. I sliced a piece, cold now, and ate it without reheating. Tasted different, deeper, as if time had settled into it overnight. Afterward, I opened the curtains. Dust floated in the sunlight. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but truer. Every mark on the wall, every chipped edge, every stubborn piece of furniture felt like proof of endurance rather than decay. I walked through each room slowly, touching things I hadn't touched in a long time. The back of a chair. The spine of a book. The light switch by the door. Ownership isn't always about papers or keys. Sometimes it's about recognition. By mid-morning, I heard my phone buzz again. I didn't check it right away. I let it sit on the counter, face down, vibrating like a trapped insect. When I finally turned it over, her name filled the screen. Julia. No message. Just missed calls. 3 of them. I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. Like I was watching something happen from the other side of glass. I remembered all the other times I'd swallowed words to keep peace. All the moments I told myself it was easier not to react. Easier to wait. Easier to adjust. Easier to eat later. I had confused being needed with being valued. That afternoon, I pulled a notepad from the drawer and wrote a list. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just facts. My house. My accounts. My name. Seeing the words in ink did something strange to me. They stopped feeling theoretical. They became solid. Real. Present. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. Life continued, indifferent to my reckoning. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. The phone buzzed again. This time, a message appeared beneath her name. Where did you go? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I set the phone face down again and took another sip of tea, letting it cool in my mouth. Because the question wasn't where I had gone. It was how long I had been disappearing before anyone noticed. That evening, I would make a call I hadn't planned to make, to the one person who might understand what leaving really meant. And when she answered, everything would begin to shift. I held the phone longer than I meant to before dialing. My thumb hovered, hesitating, not because I didn't want to call, but because I wasn't sure what version of myself would answer on the other end. The quiet one? The careful one? Or the woman who had just walked out carrying a roast like it was her last remaining proof of worth? The call connected after 2 rings. Grandma. Her voice hit me like warm light through a cracked door. I didn't speak right away. I had to swallow first. Had to make sure my voice wouldn't betray me. Hi, sweetheart. There was a pause. Not awkward. Attentive. Are you okay? She asked gently. That question, simple, sincere, nearly undid me. Not where are you? Not what happened. Just are you okay? As if my state of being mattered more than the inconvenience I'd caused. I am, I said finally. At least, I think I am. She didn't rush me. I could hear her breathing on the other end, steady and patient. I pictured her the way she used to be as a child. Watching more than speaking. Absorbing everything adults thought she didn't notice. Moments passed. I left, I said. Another pause. Then a slow exhale. Good, she said softly. That was it. No lecture. No panic. No guilt dressed up as concern. Just one word, clean and unwavering. Something in my chest loosened. I took the roast, I added, almost apologetically, like a confession. She laughed. Not mockingly, not dismissively, but with something like pride woven into it. That sounds like you, she said. The part of you they forget about. We talked then. Not about the dinner. Not about my daughter. Not about blame. We talked about ordinary things. About the weather near her apartment. About a book she was reading. About a cat that kept sneaking into her window like it had a standing invitation. Normal conversation. Equal conversation. At one point she said, "Do you want company tomorrow? Not do you need help? Not should I come rescue you? Just company." "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the word came out. "I'd like that." When we hung up, the house felt different. Not fuller. Not louder. Anchored. That evening I walked through the rooms again, but this time I wasn't cataloging loss. I was noticing space. Places where something new could exist. I opened windows. Let cold air rush in. Let it sweep through corners that had been holding their breath for years. The phone buzzed again. More messages now. Longer. Sharper. "You embarrassed me." The kids were confused. "We need to talk about this like adults." I read them without flinching. Adults. I wondered when adulthood had started meaning silence instead of self-respect. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the pantry and pulled out an old folder. The one with documents I hadn't looked at since before I moved out of my own routines and into someone else's rules. Papers rustled as I spread them across the table. Deeds. Statements. Accounts. My name was still there. Everywhere. I felt something then, not anger, not fear, but clarity. The kind that arrives quietly and refuses to leave. Tomorrow my granddaughter would come. And after that, I wasn't sure. But for the first time, uncertainty didn't feel like danger. Felt like possibility. The next morning, I would open a folder I hadn't touched in years and realize just how close I had come to losing more than my place at the table. Morning arrived without ceremony. No alarms. No footsteps in the hallway. No voice calling my name with instructions disguised as concern. Just light creeping across the floor and the soft clink of the spoon against my mug as I stirred my tea. I sat at the table longer than necessary, letting the quiet stretch. Not empty, intentional. When I finally stood, I didn't rush. I went to the shelf where the old folders lived, the ones that had followed me from room to room over the years, growing thinner as decisions were slowly taken out of my hands. I carried them to the table and opened the first one. Paper remembers things people forget. Receipts. Utility bills. Renovation invoices I had paid for myself. Notes scribbled in the margins, handled, taken care of, already done. Each one written in a hand that wasn't mine. Each one a small step towards something I hadn't noticed at the time. I opened another folder. Bank statements. I frowned. The numbers were still there. Whole. Untouched. My name sat at the top in neat print, steady and unchallenged. For all the talk of "we've got this, let me handle it, it's easier if I manage things," nothing had actually been transferred. Not yet. That realization sent a slow chill through me. Not fear. Awareness. This hadn't been about legality. It had been about assumption. I powered on the old laptop I rarely used anymore. It hummed like it was surprised to be needed. I logged into the bank site, resetting a password I hadn't typed in years. The security questions came up, ones I had chosen myself long ago. Mother's maiden name. First job. Street I grew up on. I answered without hesitation. The account loaded. Everything was still mine. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing through the strange mix of relief and grief. Relief that I wasn't too late. Grief for how close I'd come without realizing it. They don't take things from you all at once. They make you believe you don't need them anymore. I made notes on a clean sheet of paper. Simple, practical steps. Visit the bank. Review access. Separate what needed separating. No drama. No announcements. Clarity didn't require permission. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "You're overreacting. We were just trying to help." I didn't respond, because help that silences you isn't help. It's control wearing a polite face. I closed the laptop and looked around the kitchen. The chipped plate by the sink. The chair with the loose leg I'd fixed myself years ago. The window that caught the afternoon light just right. This place wasn't a burden. It was evidence. That afternoon I heard a knock. Not sharp. Not demanding. Soft. Measured. I didn't open the door right away, because for the first time in a long time I understood something clearly. Whoever was on the other side would not decide what happened next. When I finally opened the door, it wouldn't be my daughter standing there. And the conversation that followed would quietly change everything. I opened the door slowly. Rachel stood on the porch, a paper bag tucked under one arm, her other hand half raised like she wasn't sure if she should knock again or step back. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, cheeks pink from the cold. She looked older than the girl I remembered, and younger than the woman she was becoming. "I brought pastries," she said. And I wasn't sure what else to bring, so I just brought myself. I smiled. That's more than enough. Inside, the house seemed to notice her. The air shifted. Not louder, lighter. She set the bag on the table and glanced around, really looking the way people do when they're trying to understand a place rather than judge it. "It smells like you," she said. "Like onions and old books?" I teased. "Like real," she said, serious. We sat at the table without rushing. She poured the tea the way she'd seen me do it years ago, careful, respectful of the cup. Muscle memory passed down quietly. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I saw Mom's face last night." I didn't ask her to explain. I waited. "She looked shocked," Rachel continued. "Not angry. Just like something didn't go the way she planned." I nodded once. It didn't. Rachel picked at the edge of her pastry. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what would help. You being here helps, I said. She looked up at me then. Really looked. You're not mad, are you? I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I'm awake. That seemed to land. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small set of keys, sliding them across the table toward me. I made copies, she said. For emergencies. And for not emergencies. I touched them but didn't pick them up yet. Do I get a say in the keychain? Her smile came fast and wide. Non-negotiable. We talked then, not about the dinner, not about blame, but about her work, her tiny apartment, the neighbor's cat that kept stealing her socks. Conversation without hierarchy, without correction. At one point she said quietly, "She treats you like something she manages." I didn't disagree. "I don't want to be like that," Rachel added. "You won't," I said. "You ask before you decide." She stayed a while longer, helping me wash dishes, drying them with care. Before she left, she hugged me, firm, grounding. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. After she was gone, I stood in the kitchen holding the keys. 3 of them. Proof of access, but also of trust. I placed them in the drawer beside my old recipe cards and sat down, heart steady. That's when I knew. What had started at the table wasn't just about leaving. It was about choosing who still had a place when I stayed. That afternoon, I would take a step I hadn't planned, one that would make the silence permanent, and the boundary undeniable. I didn't rush it. That was the difference this time. In the past, every decision came wrapped in urgency. Someone else's schedule, someone else's expectations, someone else's version of what was best. But that afternoon, after Rachel left and the house settled back into its quiet, I moved slowly, deliberately, as if speed itself had once been the trap. I sat at the table with my notebook open and wrote one line at the top of the page. Clarity is not cruelty. Then I stood, put on my coat, and walked to the bus stop. No one drove me. No one asked where I was going. The bus hissed to a stop, and I climbed aboard with my bag tucked close, choosing a seat by the window. The city slid past in muted colors, brick, glass, people moving with their heads down and lives pressed tight against their chests. At the bank, the young man at the counter smiled the way people do when they expect confusion. I gave him none. "I'd like to review access on my accounts," I said, laying my ID flat on the counter. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't either. He blinked once, then nodded. Of course. 10 minutes later, I was seated in a small office signing forms, removing an authorized user, revoking online permissions, canceling automatic transfers I hadn't approved in years. Each signature felt like reclaiming a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "There's a recurring monthly transfer," he said gently, eyes flicking to the screen. "Would you like to keep that?" "No," I said. "I would not." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you like us to flag the account? In case someone tries to regain access?" "Yes," I said. "Please do." When I stepped back outside, the wind cut sharp across my face. I welcomed it. My body hummed, not with fear but with certainty. At home the phone rang. I knew who it was before I looked. Julia. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping greeting, skipping concern. "I made things clear," I said calmly. "You revoked everything. The accounts, the access. Do you have any idea how that looks?" I almost smiled. "No," I said. "I know how it feels." She inhaled sharply. "You're overreacting. You didn't have to humiliate me." "I didn't humiliate you," I said. I stopped disappearing. Silence stretched between us, brittle and unfamiliar. "You could have talked to me," she said finally. "I did," I replied. "You just didn't listen until it affected you." She scoffed. "So that's it? You're cutting me out." I thought carefully before answering. "No," I said. "I'm cutting out the version of me that needed your permission." Her breath hitched. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said again, softly this time. "I'm being exact." She didn't apologize. She didn't argue further. She just ended the call. When the line went dead, I didn't feel victorious. I felt space. That evening, I cooked a simple meal. Nothing elaborate, nothing performative. I ate at my table as the sky darkened outside, streetlights blinking on one by one. I hadn't slammed a door, but I had closed it. And on the other side of that door, something was finally quiet enough for me to hear myself think. What I didn't know yet was that closing that door would force a final reckoning. One where I'd have to decide what home really meant, and who would be allowed inside it next. The house felt different after that. Not emptier. Not fuller. Just honest. I noticed it in small ways first. The way I no longer flinched when the phone buzzed. The way I ate when I was hungry, not when it was convenient. The way my shoulders dropped when I crossed the threshold, as if my body finally understood this place no longer required performance. Days passed. Quiet ones. Julia didn't call again. Not immediately. The silence from her side wasn't peace. It was calculation. I recognized it because I'd lived inside it for years. Silence as pressure. Silence as punishment. This time it didn't work. I walked each morning just a few blocks, feeling the ground under my feet. I bought bread from the corner shop instead of asking someone else to pick it up. I watered the stubborn plants in the backyard, even the ones people said were done for. Especially those. One afternoon I opened a box I'd been avoiding. Photos. Loose ones. Bent corners. Faded colors. Evidence of a life that existed long before I became useful to other people. There I was, laughing too hard at a picnic, dancing barefoot in the kitchen, holding my girls when they were small and still believed I could fix everything. I realized something then that settled deep in my bones. I hadn't been shrinking because of age. I had been shrinking because I was constantly adjusting myself to fit into someone else's comfort. That night, Rachel came over again. No warning. No agenda. Just a knock and a familiar smile. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. We sat at the table, hands wrapped around warm mugs. At one point she said, "Mom's been asking about you." I didn't tense. I didn't sigh. I just nodded. "She says she doesn't recognize you lately." I smiled faintly. That might be the truest thing she's said in years. Rachel studied me. "Are you scared?" I thought about it. About the future. About loneliness. About what happens when you stop bending. "No," I said. I was scared when I stayed. That answer surprised both of us. Before she left, Rachel hugged me and said something I didn't expect. "I think that night at the table," she said slowly, "wasn't about food at all, was it?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know. Because the answer was finally becoming clear. And once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. After she left, I stood alone in the kitchen, looking at the chair where I'd once waited for permission to sit. I understood then that what I'd carried out the door that night wasn't dinner. It was proof. Proof that I still had choice. Voice. Weight in the world. And the truth was, the final meaning of that moment was something even I hadn't fully faced yet. In the end, I would finally say out loud what that night truly was, and why walking away with the roast saved far more than my dignity. It took time for the truth to settle. Not days, weeks. Because some realizations don't arrive like lightning. They arrive like dawn. Slowly. Quietly. I didn't wake up one morning suddenly understanding everything. I understood it in fragments. While washing a single cup instead of a sink full. While choosing what to cook without wondering who might complain. While sitting in silence that didn't accuse me of being useless. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not fixing my hair. Not checking my clothes. Just looking. At the woman staring back at me. Older, yes. Lines earned honestly. Hands that had built, held, fed, buried, survived. Eyes that had learned when to soften and when to stay sharp. And that's when it finally clicked. That night, the night I carried the roast out the door, was never about food. It was about permission. For years I had been waiting for it. Permission to sit. Permission to speak. Permission to take up space. Permission to be considered before, not after. "You'll eat after everyone else." That sentence didn't insult me. It revealed everything. It showed me where I stood. Or rather, where I didn't. And when I lifted that tray, when I walked past that table without explanation or apology, I wasn't being dramatic. I was declining a role I never agreed to play. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was choosing myself. That's why no one followed me. They didn't think I would go. They didn't think I could. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my patience for surrender, my love for obligation. And I had let them. Until I didn't. Rachel came over one afternoon not long after. We sat together, sunlight warming the floor between us. She watched me move around the kitchen. Unhurried, unafraid. "You're different," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm familiar again." She smiled. "I hope I remember this version of you." "So do I said. "Julia and I speak now. Carefully. Honestly. Not often." She is learning that access is not entitlement. That motherhood doesn't mean ownership. That respect is not automatic, it is maintained. Sometimes she still struggles. That's her work, not mine. What I learned, what I carry now is simple, but it cost me decades to understand. Being needed is not the same as being loved. Being quiet is not the same as being small. And staying is not always loyalty. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is stand up, pick up what she made with her own hands, and walk out without asking if it's allowed. If you've ever felt invisible in a room you helped build, if you've ever been told to wait your turn in a life you carried, if you've ever shrunk yourself to keep peace, let this be your reminder. You don't need a confrontation. You don't need a speech. You don't need approval. Sometimes all you need is one moment of clarity and the courage to walk. And if this story found you when you needed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment. Pass it to someone who's still waiting at the table. Because your worth was never meant to be served last.